So Kyle, our party, their levels are past 10 now, and now they can do things that gods can do, like bring people back to life, cast huge fireballs, and that kind of causes a problem sometimes. So today for our video, we're talking all about power creep.
That's right. As things get up into the higher tier of play in D&D, you don't see a lot of games get up to this level. At least I haven't seen too many. But we've been playing for pushing into past 3 years, and we started the Wildcards at 10, 11, and now pushing into 14, 15. Like, things are getting up into the high echelon of D&D.
Yeah, so if you're new here, welcome. I'm Scott. I play Valentine on the Wildcards. We stream a campaign. We've been doing it. This is our campaign 3 years now, but as Kyle just said, we started at about level 10 on YouTube, and you can find that in the comments down below. And Kyle is our lovely DM.
Yeah, I've been DMing. This is my first ever campaign, homebrew campaign I am DMing, and so that does kind of play into some of the things we want to talk about today. And this is my first ever game I've ever DM'd, and we started our campaign at level 3, or level 2, and then into 3, like kind of after the first session or two, just to get things started. So we've played right from early days up until 14, 15. So we've had quite a few experiences and quite a few things that I've learned over the 3 years of power creep, and how things at early levels have come to either bite me in the ass as we've hit this high level, or at least have played out very interestingly.
I was just about to say, is that one of the biggest things you learned is like these choices you're making early on for the party, whether that's items, whether that's abilities, when that scales up to past 10, it can be a bit of a problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the biggest things that I noticed now looking back was when things started, I just didn't realize and didn't really think about the long-term implication of giving you guys magic items early on. Mm-hmm. I was very free and just like, yeah, there's a huge horde. So I wanted everyone to get something out of an encounter. I wanted everyone to get something cool out of an arc or something like that. So very often there was always even something minor, but up to something pretty good out of almost every encounter. So it felt worthwhile. And I didn't think about the fact that, yeah, by even 3-4 levels past then, you guys were rolling in it. You were covered in magic items. You couldn't walk into a room of detect magic without glowing like crazy. Like, you're covered. Plus gold very early on was just like, yeah, sure, like 6,000 gold each. Why not?
There you go.
Not really thinking about how all of that slowly over time, you know, the gold can dwindle away, but it's not very often you're getting rid of those early magic items unless they're consumable things.
So with our power creep as well, as we get to like 10th level, there's also the factor of we multiclass. If you want like a really in-depth look at this, we have a whole video just like this one on multiclassing. And towards the end of that, we talk all about that in explicit detail. But maybe Kyle just touch on it briefly here and how our entire party multiclassing is a bit of a challenge.
Every player in our game is multiclassed in some way, low or several levels of multiclassing. And that at low levels, it's not so bad. You don't have that many abilities on either side of your multiclass. At 5th level, maybe you dipped one level into one other class. It's not going to break the game. When you're pushing up into 14 level and you've got a lot of abilities into, we'll use Valentine for the example as you're here, 12 levels into Bard, and you get into high-level spells and all the things you get with all the Bard stuff, and still a 2-level Hexblade Warlock, you now can do a lot. You can do a lot with your turn, a lot out of combat, and you've just got a lot of utility at your disposal for a relatively easy dip into another class that, as you now are up into this high echelon of play, it just opens the world for what it is you can do. That power creep really hits now that we're up this high level. Low level decisions have really made huge impact.
And that's just one of the members of the Wildcards. There's five other ones.
That's right.
But you can watch that video and I'll give you a lot more information on that. Why don't we talk about items? I had some ideas for items, but I'll just come out and say it. Yeah. I was researching power creep myself, and I was seeing some DMs talk about it online in a forum. And one of their suggestions, because they had granted 2 powerful items to their group, was they were either going to have them all stolen or destroyed, or B, bring them to a place where they no longer work for the entirety of that like arc. And I'll just say, from a player perspective, and fortunately some DMs are chiming in too, that just kind of seemed unfair to the players. Like, I know there is a compromise there, and that's what I think you need to do. But yeah, to steal all the cool things that you give or break, that's not great.
No, I don't particularly like either of those solutions. If you really had to narrow it down, I don't necessarily hate the idea that, like, in, say, a dungeon, there is an anti-magic field in certain areas. So certain encounters become difficult, but not the whole dungeon. I like the idea of an anti-magic room. So you enter this kind of boss room, and it just becomes a slog fest with a troll, or maybe not a troll, but or a giant or something like that. And suddenly, your magic items aren't at your back. That's a single encounter, though. I don't particularly like take them away and destroy them. But it is difficult. I fully understand from that perspective that, like, you give your low-level players something a little too powerful, and as things go on, that powerful item is still there. It's still going to be making them more powerful than perhaps they should be in terms of challenge rating and stuff like that.
And I mean, like, people get attached to their items, and if you grant this from the top, so I understand the challenge, but I think the big thing, unfortunately, someone offered this advice in this forum, was talk to your players, have that conversation, and just say, guys, I gave you these items, but they're like game breaking. Yeah. Like, now I can't give you a problem that you can't just easily solve with, like, oh, this ruby that allows me to plane shift 5 times a day. Like, oh, I can just do this. Then, like, that's hurting the story.
It might be too much, but I think, talk to your DM, talk to your players. If you're the DM and you're having issues with that, talk to them. But perhaps the solution isn't to take away or destroy, but to modify. Go back in, and maybe instead of plane shifting 5 times a day, it's once a day. And once it's used, you can't do it for a week. Like, minor tweak, you still have that ability. And maybe, you have to change it entirely, but that's just the first idea off the top of my head. What I quite like is the idea of an evolving item.
This is what I was just about to say. I love this. Yeah, keep going, because I love this.
Obviously, Matt Mercer's Vestiges of Divergence are the kind of the go-to for the obvious choice of these kinds of leveling items. In both of his campaigns, these have appeared on Critical Role. And as a DM, it's a cool idea. As a player, you gotta love an item that you think is going to get more powerful with you as you go on. You form a bond with this thing that is at even at its lowest level still pretty cool. But knowing that it's going to get more powerful with you, it's going to awaken and then exalt as he writes it. That is a great idea that keeps it balanced. And as the DM, you now have full control over when it gets those levels, when it awakens, when it exalts, and it can time better with how you view the power creep of your game, and you can kind of control the scale.
Yeah, and from a player perspective, I mean, just like you saw, I absolutely adore that idea, because then you can get really attached to something. I hated the idea of, like, one of our characters, Hondo, gets attached to a dagger and then finds, like, a cooler dagger, so he never uses that dagger anymore. You'll see on our channel, like, Hondo sticks with his original dagger because he loves it. He has, like, an attachment to it. So I'm a big believer in that. I've seen some ways, Kyle, you would know more about this, but I've seen people even do it with, like, a proficiency bonus. Like, as you scale, so does it.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, I think there's tons of ways you can do that. But it's just having that foresight to know, okay, I got to have this foundation or else it's going to get out of control.
Yeah. And everything kind of scales too. It's not just items. Items is just a very easy and obvious place to start. But as the power creep of your party grows, so too do the enemies that they're facing. So too do the encounters that are not directly combat, travel and filler encounters, travel as a whole, and kind of the grinding that you do at low levels ultimately becomes unnecessary at high levels. So if you still are trying to implement those kind of rolled encounters for travel and stuff like that to keep the world real, you may need to modify those, because when I've even used it in our game, but it was with the knowledge that the party's going to steamroll this. That's okay. Like, it's fine. Let them go full Nova. Let them blow their crazy high spells on a bunch of gnolls. Who cares? They're gnolls. They don't mean anything. It's just fun to, like, fill in a gap. But you make the encounter less about killing the gnolls, but about protecting the people the gnolls and you as the party are around. The gnolls aren't going to focus, or whatever your creature isn't going to focus the crazy powerful party. But perhaps there's a small child and a group of families who are around the camp that they're around they are the target. So now it's let the party be crazy powerful, but they need to play smart so that the innocents aren't hurt. So you have to kind of reskin the encounters to fit the power creep and less be about, well, they're just going to smash my monsters. That's okay. Let them smash monsters. It makes them feel cool. You still get the combat if you're into it, but you add another element in there to keep the drama.
And from the player perspective, I really like that too. I'm glad we're in a campaign that you run that isn't like, I'm going to roll a D4 and guess what? Even if you're resting, if it's a 4, you're going to have to fight these people. I don't find that fun. It reminds me of playing Pokemon, trying to walk from one place to another, and then you just keep getting like a Pidgey or a Rattata just like attacking you. Very boring. But even in this encounter, you're kind of referencing an encounter that does happen on stream, and there is some role play backstory subtext like baked into it that makes it more interesting and exciting. With that little like random one-offs aside, why don't we talk about, because I think you've done a really good job with this, big bad boss fights when you're trying to do power creep as well.
Those are the big ones, and that's the big part of power creep that is the most difficult to balance from a DM side, but also has the easiest solutions. It requires a great amount of flexibility, a great amount of trying to use your foresight as a DM to see, okay, well, you know what all the items they have, you know all their abilities, and not to directly counter them, because you never want to do that, because that's just going to make your players feel like you're acting against them, because this is the core of it, is that it's not DM versus player. It's not player versus DM. It's a collaborative experience on both sides. But with that in mind, as if you watch our game, my encounters I designed to be difficult. I designed to be deadly, especially as we get into the boss encounters and the high level stuff. I designed them so that there is still risk, because risk and consequence is incredibly important to making it feel real. Even though you guys are incredibly powerful, you have items out your ass. It's the responsibility of having all of those items and having all this power and how you use it. Designing the encounters, I keep it deadly, I keep it challenging, knowing you can find a way out.
And you're flexible. You've talked about that too. You got to be flexible with HP, like with a boss, whether you're lowering or heightening that. But as well, I think you've talked about too, look, if it really can't just be one big bad fighting in our instance 6 enemies, because just by like combat economy, we get like 6 turns on this guy before they can go again. So how do you figure out how to play with that?
The action economy is difficult, but there are plenty of tools at the DM's disposal to work with that. As soon as if you want to have a singular item or a singular creature, a boss monster, and be a singular monster, keeping in mind that power creep as you get up, your monsters have to elevate. They have to become legendary. They have to have legendary actions, legendary resistances, things to make them stand apart from a very powerful party, but not so powerful that the party couldn't lay a hit on them. Not so powerful that they are, they have 1,000 reactions and 1,000 legendary resistances and they can just keep doing stuff. There is a balancing act to it. As much as you're being flexible to keep your boss monster interesting and to keep the fight interesting, there has to be give and take. Deal a lot of damage, but get hit a lot as well. There has to be just this whole give and take of the entire encounter. Sometimes I admit that I'll stack on an extra 100, 200 health as I see the fight begin. Honestly, I noticed that Mary can deal 150 points of damage if she really wants to, Alana.
And if she crits on that first hit, if they crit on the first hit, you don't want it to last like 2 rounds. You want
the 2 of them together, and then Hondo throws in a crit on a sneak attack. With the 3 of them, if the dice are on their side and not mine, they could deal crazy amounts of damage crazy fast, and casters included. 3 Lavender, Valentine, and Gord all have high level spells, not even just damaging spells. Mass Suggestion, crazy powerful spell, like lots of big spells that can control and harness the fight. So this is where the legendary resistances come important. This is where thinking ahead of like, what are the saves that make sense for this monster, just their actual saves, their wisdom save or whatever it is, making sure those bonuses fit the appropriate level that your monster is. And Yeah, it can be very difficult to balance those encounters, but sometimes, just stacking on a bunch of hit points is all you need to make it fit. But there's just a little bit more work than just picking something out of the monster manual and going with it.
Exactly. You got to be flexible. And players want that too, from the player perspective. Like, we don't want it to be over instantly. We want that tension. We want those stakes. We want it to go back and forth. Like, the fights I like the most are when you can feel momentum changes.
Yeah,
oh, it looks like we're doing well. Oof, now we're not doing well. This is not going great. Yeah. Something you didn't mention that I've always kind of enjoyed are like layer actions too.
Yes.
When the place you are is affected and can do different things. I think that's always neat too.
Yeah, that's a great way. Yeah, absolutely. When you have a boss encounter or just an interesting encounter, period, it doesn't have to be a boss one, to keep the environment part of the fight, and to not necessarily use just something that is going to attack hit points. Hit points are not the be all end all. Having the environment split and force now distance is a problem. Now there's environmental factors that are splitting the party apart. You could do 1,000 different things, but making your players think three-dimensionally more so than just attack the health bar. That's where this high level D&D, you need to be a little bit more creative. Unfortunately, it is part of the power creep of the game, is that as a DM, you have to evolve. You have to learn and grow alongside all of your villains, your monsters, and the encounters themselves. The style of encounter has to kind of change to no longer be a simple hack and slash.
And here's the thing. Sorry to cut you off. That's why there's a screen. You're not cheating as a DM by making these changes on the fly. Like, that's why there's a screen, because you got to adapt on the fly. You're telling the story. So don't feel anything wrong with doing this stuff in the background. Like, for me to hear that you add that stuff doesn't bother me at all, because I'm just like looking at the story. I don't want it to be over in 2 rounds. So I think it's great. That being said, I want to make sure we mention this, because I think we mentioned it in the prep talk just before this and not on stream. You said the worst part about power creep is it can start to feel at higher levels that the DM and players are against each other. Yeah. And that's not what you want.
No, that's going to be kind of my final thought with this video. Is the game collectively is collaborative. All of this is about trust. You never want to come across as DM versus players. When you're facing these high level threats, it can sometimes feel like you're always in these deadly encounters, but know that you can't always make it literally deadly. There always has to be a way for the players to get out. And the players have to know that their DM has that kind of hope, or at least you hope that your DM is thinking with those terms, that you want your players to get out. You want your players to succeed. And on both sides, it's the old adage of, with great power comes great responsibility. On both sides, the players and the DM have to balance one another so that you have a great game on both sides.
And that's what I like the most. I know we're never going into a situation that we can't win. Will it be very hard? Sure. But you've always been open to admitting that to us. Like, you guys can win, but this is a challenge. This looks dark for you.
Absolutely.
But I like that. And I like the you've taken such a cool perspective where it's like the godlike perspective over this. We're not fighting you. You're the one who are just setting up these things. And again, you're all telling this collaborative story together.
Mm-hmm. That's the big thing.
So that's all for Power Creep in this video. If you like this video, we got tons more of these kind of talks with player and DM perspectives coming up on the channel. We'll link some of them below. And honestly, if you like this video, please hit subscribe. It really does help the channel out.
Absolutely. Subscribe. And there's a new episode up of our game every Tuesday, so stay tuned for that.
And that's all for us. So we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.